Redmi have just released the K30 Pro series and also the Zoom edition on top of that as well, which adds a 3x telephoto lens. There is a base model that comes just under 3,000 RMB in China, which is about $450. Is that version really any different to the other versions? Is it so much different to the K30 Pro Zoom edition that you should pay the extra money and go for the Zoom edition? Or is the base model plenty good enough? Let's compare the two and see where the differences are. Firstly, in the screens, they are absolutely exactly the same on every single one of these phones. The battery size and the charging specs are again the same across all of the versions, even the cheap version up to the most expensive Pro Zoom edition have exactly the same battery specs. Actually, it's just quicker to tell you what's different between the base model and all of the other models. It uses a different form of RAM and storage. It uses a last generation LPDDR4X RAM, whereas all of the other versions, including the Zoom edition, use LPDDR5. And it also uses UFS 3.0 storage, whereas all of the other versions use UFS 3.1. So before I get into a quick camera comparison between the phones, I just wanted to test, is there really a difference between these RAM and storage options? So put them side by side. And firstly, just ran an Antutu benchmark. And yes, the Pro Zoom edition did come out on top of the base model, but really not by much. It is definitely in the same ballpark. And just using these phones for the last day or so, honestly, you could not tell the difference when you're just using the phones normally between the different setups in the Pro Zoom edition and the base model. The only difference for me that could make a difference in terms of how you use the phone and how convenient it is maybe the difference in RAM, because the base model only has 6 GB. I opened up this list of apps exactly the same on both of the phones and just went through the apps and tested if any were shut down in any of the phones. So as you can see, as I flick through all of the different apps that are exactly the same on these two models, you will see that all of the apps are kept in memory on both of the phones, even though the Pro Zoom edition does have an extra 2 GB of RAM, and it is an LPDDR5 RAM instead of the LPDDR4X that is found in the base model. Opening this music app, this was just an advert screen on this phone. It didn't reload the app. So both phones literally performed exactly the same, even though they had slightly different internal setups. I tend to think app opening tests are a little bit irrelevant, but I wanted to open these very heavy games from memory just to see if this storage difference made any speed difference in opening the apps. As you can see in this test, they were literally loaded from the storage at exactly the same time on both phones. So for me, there is no difference whatsoever in the Pro Zoom edition and the base model in terms of loading apps, using apps, and keeping apps in memory. So when it comes to the cameras, the Pro Zoom edition has that extra 3x telephoto zoom lens over the base model and the non-zoom edition, which doesn't have a zoom lens at all. Also, there is a slight and very subtle design difference between the Zoom edition. They both have this Oreo-shaped camera cutout, but the Zoom edition just adds this circular accent around the camera bump on the body of the phone, which the base model and the non-zoom edition don't have. So when using the two phones, there is a difference in the camera app. They both have the ultra-wide camera, the main camera, and they both have a zoom option. The base model and the non-zoom go to a 2x telephoto zoom, but that will be cropped in on the main sensor, whereas the Zoom edition has a 3x telephoto zoom using that extra zoom lens. The Zoom edition goes to a 30x telephoto at the longest zoom, whereas the non-zoom editions go to a 10x. You can just see me here pinching on the screen. On the Zoom edition, you can hold down the zoom button and then slide up and down to zoom in and out. On the non-zoom edition, it doesn't have that. You have to pinch the screen. It definitely is a very weird difference that Redmi did this. This seems to be a software limitation. Maybe they want to differentiate the two phones. If you were in a store and saw the two phones side by side, one could zoom really easily and one couldn't. Maybe you'd be puffed into buying the more expensive model. Other than that though, the camera apps are exactly the same in terms of video and slow-mo and video recording rates and resolutions. Going from the ultra wide here, which is a 13 megapixel on both phones, then to the main camera, which again should look exactly the same. And now you can see the different zoom ranges here, a 2x versus a 3x telephoto. And another test here from the ultra wide, which looks exactly the same, I think. Then going into the main sensor, again looks exactly the same. And you can see the difference between 2 and 3x telephoto on the phones. And then at 10x zoom, which is the maximum for the non-zoom edition, the zoom edition could go on to 20x zoom and then max out at 30x zoom, which is here. There is an extra zoom range, but I honestly feel like it is pretty noisy. And I'm not sure you could really use this 30x zoom shot anyway. They both have optical image stabilization on the main lens. Even in the zoom edition, and when you zoom in for video, it does not use the zoom lens. You are always shooting off the main lens for video. But you can see here the zoom edition zooms into a 3x, whereas the non-zoom edition zooms into a 2x. So yeah, that's a really important thing to note. On the zoom edition for video, it will use the main camera sensor no matter what you zoom in and out of, the same as the base model. So you shouldn't be getting any better results from the zoom edition in video, at least, when it comes to zoom on any of the phones. In photo though, you do get a difference. The optical zoom range from that 3x telephoto just gives you a crisper image at that 3x. However, I really don't think the difference is massive. It seems like a lot of money to pay for a tiny difference in the zoom range only on photo and not in video. Also on the non-zoom edition, you get the really awesome macro sensor too. The price difference between the base model and the base model of the Zoom edition, in China at least, is about 30%, which is quite a lot of money for an extra zoom camera that gives you a tiny bit of extra zoom in photo only. So let me know your thoughts. Would you pay the extra money for that tiny bit of extra zoom range, or do you think the better value phone is that base model coming in at that cheaper price and giving you more or less the same experience? Subscribe for all the latest tech news and videos. That's it for now, but I'll see you in the next one.